Good morning. This is the Innovation Conversation, our first one for 2024. How you doing, Tom?
Good, Kevin. Happy New Year to you and to all. I know it's a little late to
I'm
be
not
saying that, but
saying
it's our
Happy
first
New
one.
I'm not saying Happy New Year because Larry David says,
I
and Larry
know.
David is the font of all wisdom, that the last day you should say New Year on is January 3rd. After
Yeah,
after on the 4th and beyond, not so much.
yeah, I agree with that. All right, I take that back.
Anyway, I'm feeling wistful about Larry David since the last season of Curb Your Enthusiasm is supposed to start any week now. So anyway,
Love
so
it.
you had a good holiday?
Had a good holiday.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great to have the kids home and lots of good family time, friend time, and it was wonderful.
Now
Yeah, how about yourself?
your kids didn't go to University of Washington, but just because that's where you
No,
live.
they're Cougs. So that's their bitter rival.
So you're okay
Uh,
with the way the championship turned out.
I'm okay with it. Kids and kids' friends are thrilled with it because, yeah. Now the Cougs did take the Huskies
Yes.
down to the final play of the game when the Huskies had to kick a field goal to beat them. So, the Huskies are lucky they were even there because the Cougs could have taken them out a few weeks, I don't know, 2 weeks before the end, the last week of the season in the
Wow.
Apple Cup. But
Okay.
whatever. It was a good
So
game.
I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about a story that I had on Morning Newsbeat, but it got a lot of attention because it had the words Amazon and closes in the same headline and sentence. And that was the announcement that they were closing their Amazon Fresh Pickup locations in Washington. And some of the coverage made it sound like, oh, this was a big deal because this was a major initiative. And it never really was, I don't think. I mean, they only had two, right?
Hmm.
They had one by Starbucks headquarters and the other one was in
Ballard.
Ballard.
Yeah.
And I guess the Ballard one had closed a month or two ago, and then this one closed at the end of the year. But I guess I'm interested in the whole notion of a delivery depot or a pickup depot,
Hmm.
because that's something when you were at Amazon now, I don't know how, or don't even know how many years ago, you guys were actually playing with that concept on a different scale then. So can you talk about that a little bit? And what is it?
Yeah.
Why doesn't the concept seem to work?
So we did offer it back when we initially launched. We had the delivery service.
Right.
Um, and I would say an element of the delivery service that was differentiating versus others that were around at the time was you could order up until midnight for pre-dawn delivery. So, and then you could also order in 1 hour delivery slots.
Right.
So you didn't have to be at your house for longer than an hour to be there to meet the delivery driver. We also had unattended delivery as well, where it would sit in a tote, and there's all kinds of issues with that model. But basically, and then we also offered the drive up. We had multiple, drive up pickup stations. And what we found at the time is when you have the types of services competing with each other, or not really competing with each other, but where customers have options, the 1 hour slot at home or that order at night for pre-dawn delivery. I mean, I'm going to bed, I place my order, I wake up and it's there. The convenience of that was a lot more than trying to route yourself, past a pickup depot, and dealing with traffic and whatnot. So within that kind of service portfolio, customers definitely opted more toward pickup. This is now this is many years later, and you're still competing though with the delivery profile, but you're also competing with um, there's a lot more retailers that offer curbside pickup. I would say most grocers to some
Mhm.
degree offer some kind of curbside pickup. And so you have to have that right combination of, the compelling assortment, the great service, and then just ease of location, right? And, I don't know, I'm not that familiar with the Ballard location. I mean, I certainly remember the reports on it and seeing it, but I never actually went to it. I've been to the one in the Starbucks parking lot. I didn't find the one in the Starbucks parking lot to be particularly convenient.
Right.
And I also don't know how many people live around there. It's a
I
kind of
think
an
it was
industrial
positioned,
area
yeah, it seemed to me that was always positioned to grab people as they're about
on
to
the way
get
out of
on the
work.
bridge to go over to West Seattle.
Yeah, yeah. But again, not even really that convenient to that
Right,
though, right? And
right,
with the amount of traffic that's around there and whatnot. So, there's probably a series of things that, created challenge around that, that in that case said, investing in these things, doesn't make sense. I don't know that that means that pickup is definitely not part of Amazon's long-term strategy. It certainly could be. And we do see, again, traditional grocers that offer pickup, it can be pretty convenient. And, I think you're finding today generally pickup versus delivery is pretty balanced in how customers are selecting it.
right.
So it's desirable. And then, you do have, particularly in foreign markets, you do have some drive up only formats
Yeah.
that generally do seem to be doing pretty well. So I wouldn't say the pickup model is dead, but it's got to hit all the right, value elements, to be valuable
Yeah.
to the customer
Well, I
and
know when,
stand out from any competition that's nearby.
yeah, I know when Brick Meets Clicks, when they do their monthly studies, almost always when there's if there's only growth in one, there's always growth in the pickup model, not the delivery model. And almost always, if there's growth in both sides of it, it's always more growth in the pickup model. So
Yeah, I
that
think you're
seems to be
seeing,
pretty consistent.
it-
But that's,
yeah, and as retailers get better at offering it, I think you're
yeah.
gonna continue to see that.
I guess my question is it, I've always thought that, it would make sense to have these satellite locations that are only pickup, maybe if you're and if you're a retailer with 40,000 SKUs, you could have little small locations with 400 SKUs and then use it as a pickup location. So you could have more of a footprint. But this story made me wonder if one of the things, if you're going to innovate around this idea, that the consumer wants to know that the fresh product they're buying is actually been brought out from the store, right? There's for some reason, is it possible that the consumer just wants the connection to the store, even if they don't want to go into the store? They want to know that's where it came from.
Yeah, I think there could definitely be some of that. Um, what's interesting though is you really would rather not have the produce have been at least sitting on the shelf at the store,
Right.
right?
True.
If you could actually pick the produce earlier, before it's even handled, being put on a display or handled by other customers, and you could actually get it into an order with fewer touches, it's actually fresher produce. There's still education to be done around that. But I do think though that notion of the store being familiar, being the hub that's drawn you to that spot, usually those stores, they're grocers are pretty good at this. So generally the stores are in a convenient location that you're used to
Right.
going to. And, pick up when I can just in the course of my travel, be able to swing in and do that is a lot more convenient than what's often a 2-hour delivery slot,
Right.
for delivery and having to be home during that 2-hour window. Sometimes it may work, but other times it may be tough. And so, I think, pickup done right, can be really good. And, you
Well,
mentioned that, would it, is there a format where you'd have, the 200 or 400 items that are kind of quick pickup items? We did that. We experimented with that with Fresh, and we just, it's you'd think it would be easy to get the 200 items right because it's one of the high movers, high, kind of last minute things. You can think of things like bananas and milk and eggs, and you go on. There's a bunch of stuff you tend to need last minute, but it's pretty hard to get that right. And so you actually end up with with more shrink in those things than you'd want to have.
mm,
Trying to maintain that at the location, as well as doing the pickup. Although there's probably a model, definitely there's a model out there that has this combination of pickup and either a store or a key assortment that is compelling to customers to have easier access to.
that being out there where they had these two stores that they were using, you'd have a better sense of this than I do. But it was never my sense that they really aggressively like marketed them and marketed the advantages of them, right? If another, and I think I always think part of the problem with this is if you don't explain to people, okay, where they are, why they're there, and what the real benefit to them is, we don't live in a if you build it, they will come kind of world anymore.
Totally.
And I mean, back in your days when you were starting Amazon and the fresh business, I mean, you had the produce guy who was there and he was picking the bananas, and then you marketed him,
I
right?
miss Mike.
Like,
Yes.
and so
Yeah.
that's, and I think this is I think this is sort of a broad criticism I would have across the board for a lot of companies in the food business is they innovate sometimes with technology, sometimes with fresh food, sometimes prepared foods,
Yeah.
specialized food, whatever. But they don't do a really good job of explaining it. They don't really do a good job
Yeah.
of communicating the advantages to customers. Um, and
100%.
and that's a real problem, especially in terms of stuff like this, which breaks the mold.
It's huge. I mean, it's creating the excitement, it's explaining it, it's delivering on
Right.
that promise, right? Reaffirming that, boy, you guys told me this, I made this decision, I'm really happy that I did, I'm going to make it again, right? And then continuing that and getting that cycle. And it's creating that personality. Um, I think some of the greatest retailers, whether it's a person that is that personality or the retailer itself exudes a personality, right? I think that's really important. I mean, you talk about Stu Leonard all the time. I mean, what a great, there's no better example, of a retailer that just exudes personality and that breeds trust. Um, and you could think across, a number of retailers where you have that, and then even retailers where you don't have the person, but you have this kind of mythical, being in like Trader Joe's,
Right.
right? There's an essence of a dialogue there and an essence of personality that I think is really key. And I think a lot of retailers do lose that the bigger you get. And frankly, I think Amazon doesn't have that in that part of the business. I don't think Amazon has that, and if that's limiting them and their success here, that could be a factor.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me, I mean, listen, companies, whether you're a one store company or you're a 2,000 store company, right? They all have marketing people or marketing departments but it's always my sense that at virtually none of these companies is there like somebody on staff whose job is every time they put a new item into stores, how are we going to explain A, that it's there, and B,
Yep.
why it's different, why you should come buy it from us? Right? I was having this conversation with somebody the other day about spices and spices that go into stores, and think about all that stuff. But you put a new brand of spices into a store and you just put it up in the price and you don't really explain to me why it's different, then it's like, why would I care? How would I know? And
Yeah,
that's
it
the
should
real
almost be
problem.
part of the, it should almost be part of like the new item introduction process,
Right.
is that there is some marketing communication done around that. Now, retailers do a lot of cycling in and out of items. So, that could be a massive lift, and it could be, you could be super inundating customers with that. But, you could certainly personalize to that, right? You don't have to, as long as that education's available for all of those, you could decide, all right, Kevin's going to get, the spice notification, and Tom's going to get the laundry detergent notification,
Right.
based on my personalization. Or maybe each month we get one new item notification that fits our profile, something like that, which is
Yeah.
creating that dialogue. I think there's real value in that.
But you said something interesting there, which is that retailers cycle in and out of a lot of new items. But we know that what, 60 to 70% of all new items fail,
Hmm.
right? Is the reason they're failing is nobody's communicating their advantages to anybody? I mean, part of the reason they're probably a lot of them are failing is because they're only there because somebody wrote a check for a slotting allowance, right? That's a different rabbit hole. But if could you, if you cut the number of new items that you brought into your store by X%, could you actually raise your success level simply by communicating about them? And by the way, I think part of the problem is a lot of retailers also depend on the manufacturer to do it, but that I
Yeah,
don't know the
yeah.
manufacturers
I
always
mean,
do
I
a
think that
particularly good
that's
job.
That is a whole big other discussion, but I'm sure there's opportunity around that. I mean, we definitely have too many new items every year. Too many of them fail. There's a big business in introducing and slotting new items. That is an important element of the profit of retailers. It doesn't help retailers or brands long term, but it's part of the current economic model. And there are models where you could think of different approaches to introducing products. You could think of things like having certain products available, online only, to be, available for pickup, when you come in. And as long as we know about it, know you want it, and either through auto replenishment or an advanced order, we can have that ready for you. There's ways you could get creative around the model to, I think, reduce the cost and noise of new items, but also increase the value,
Yeah.
the marketing value of those new
Yeah.
items.
I mean, I think, listen, everybody, people they will innovate around products, they'll innovate around technology,
Mhm.
but and they'll innovate around services, but they don't necessarily innovate around the way they communicate about any of those things. And I guess maybe that's and I'd have to think this, metaphor through, but is that the fourth leg on the table? Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think storytelling is huge,
Right.
right? And that's a major influencer, an enhancer of the experience, to your shoppers.
One last question before I let you go on a completely different subject, which is there was this story that came out a few days ago about how basically Amazon, this is from the information, saying that Amazon's corporate headcount more than tripled over 5 years to hit around 415,000 by the end of 2022, outpacing growth at other big tech companies such as Microsoft and Alphabet. And, I have to say, my first reaction to that was, well, I can't say what my first reaction to it was, but you get the point. Um, and but I wondered afterwards. I mean, first of all, okay, that was a period of the pandemic, so part of the Amazon has conceded, like a lot of other companies, they expanded their employee base so much that's why they had to kind of bring it back at a certain point. But I guess my question to you is in terms of specifically,
Mhm.
does that even sound like a lot of people to you? And then the second question is, when you hear numbers like that, do you think that having that kind of burgeoning bulk at the top
Mhm.
can get in the way of innovation simply because you're creating so much infrastructure? How are you how do you maintain your ability to be nimble if you've got that many people?
Oh,
And
so
maybe it's
much.
just that Amazon's in so many businesses, they had to have that many
Well,
people.
a lot to unpack in that. So I think,
Okay.
again, starting at the end and working back to the beginning, clearly it becomes more challenging to innovate at scale, to be agile when you have more people,
Right.
right? And so that's why you have things like Amazon's leadership principles, right, to refer back to help guide at scale. You have Amazon's innovation process around their business planning process, the six pager process, how they budget, how they set plans in motion, check back against those plans, and evolve strategy. So all of that stuff can actually enable you to stay agile at larger scale, but it is definitely more challenging, like a lot more challenging. And so, yeah, I mean, that can absolutely be inhibiting their ability to be nimble and innovate at scale. The numbers are huge. If you look at what Amazon's top line has done over that same period, it's probably roughly doubled. Um, the relative number of staff to top line, the staff increase in staff rate is higher, but Amazon's become, even with all the innovation they're doing, a lot more profitable.
Right.
So most businesses at Amazon, particularly led by AWS and advertising, right, is more profitable. So they are getting return on this large investment of people, but could they be getting a bigger return if they hired fewer people? Perhaps. I think they know what they're doing, but it is one of those things where, in all these corners of the company, if you're adding, do you end up, bloated to a point where, as you say, it's now day two. Um,
Yeah.
but if you look at investments in AWS and advertising and those big growth businesses, where you're adding people to either develop new capabilities or sell more, right? So a bigger sales force to reach more customers. And in the stores business, um, they've made changes to the network. Obviously, they added a bunch of staff to the network that doesn't necessarily count in that number, but the management of that staff does. And then as they have their new way that they're laid out to have, more smaller hubs that are closer to more customers, that requires more management too. So, yeah, the numbers are big, but the business does look like it's performing on top of those numbers. But I know that like the street is always looking for a little bit more clarity and a little bit more dialogue around that as they assess, Amazon as an investment relative to some of these other tech opportunities.
Yeah. Well, I know I've seen a number of headlines lately where there's in the investment community, they're expecting Amazon's stock price this year in 2024 to hit new highs, which is, considering how high it's been, that says something.
Yeah, yeah, that says something. It also, as an Amazon shareholder, it also makes me worry, like, the old Warren Buffett quote, be greedy when others are fearful,
Right.
and fearful when others are greedy. You do wonder if the market is over enamored with Amazon right now. Although, if you do look at what their profitability projections and growth in that are going forward, and what that could do to share price, there is reason to believe.
And then, of course, the FTC could break them up, but that's a different
And
topic
it's a
for
whole
another
different
day.
conversation. We've said that may not necessarily be a bad thing,
Yeah.
for
Anyway,
sure.
great to see you as always, and thanks as always for doing this. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good. I look forward to it. Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care.